2011, 2 years after the release of Rob Zombie's Halloween 2, a sequel to that movie was announced, titled Halloween 3D. Oh god. Which would have been released on October 26th of 2012, and Halloween fans contemplated what they did wrong in their lives to deserve such punishment. There was no director or writer attached at the time of the announcement, but eventually Patrick Lucier and Todd Farmer, the guy that sent Jason into space, were set to write. But they would eventually leave to work on the Hellraiser reboot, confirming that after you write the script that sends Jason into space, you're fucking cursed when it comes to rebooting a franchise in horror. Halloween 3D was to pick up where Rob Zombie's 2009 movie left off, with Michael Myers dead as fuck, Sam Loomis dead as fuck, and Laurie either crazy or also dead as fuck, depending on how you interpret the ending. Realizing that the main characters were dead as fuck, they dropped the October 26, 2012 release date because they weren't making any progress in the film. I wish this was the real reason they weren't making any progress, as it actually hasn't really been discussed too much. But I mean, come on. Myers was fucking dead and was filled with more lead than the paint in the old Victorian-era house I lived in when I was a kid. In early 2015, Patrick Melton and Marcus Dunstan were reported to be writing a new Halloween film, which was described as a recalibration and not another reboot. Malek Akkad and Matt Stein were also set to produce this recalibration. In June of the same year, the Weinstein Company was also reported to be moving ahead with another Halloween film, with the title being Halloween Returns. It was being floated around and Dunstan was set to direct. This film was set to be a standalone film that was to reintroduce Michael Myers to audiences and take place after the original Halloween and Halloween 2, because all the sequels fucking blew dick. He was also to be on death row in the film. In October of 2015, Akkad announced that the film was being postponed so more time could be spent to make a better film. Thank God. In December of 2015, Dimension Films lost the filming rights to Halloween after Halloween Returns failed to go into production on schedule. I don't understand how these fucking people have such a hard time making a goddamn Halloween movie interesting, but anyways. The film was canceled and the rights reverted to Miramax. 2015 was fucking rough for Halloween fans, dude. Actually, I'd say anything after Halloween 2 was rough for, well, John Carpenter's Halloween 2 was rough for Halloween fans. In May of 2016, Blumhouse Productions would co-finance a new Halloween with Miramax, and Universal Pictures would distribute the film through its deal with Blumhouse. Jason Blum, founder of Blumhouse, called the original Halloween a milestone that influenced the company into making horror films. Tariq Akkad had specifically sought out Blum due to his success as a horror film producer. John Carpenter, who had written the first two Halloween films and directed the original, was signed on as a producer for the untitled Halloween film, and Halloween fans rejoiced. Carpenter had stated that 38 years after the original Halloween, I'm going to try to make the 10th sequel the scariest of them all. He had also told Rotten Tomatoes that it was time to stop throwing rocks from the sidelines and get in there and try to do something positive, as Carpenter had been outspoken about his dislike for the sequels and the remake. Adam Wingard had discussed interest in making a new Halloween film, but dropped out after receiving an email from Carpenter, with Wingard stating, I kinda walked away from it like, I just got everything I wanted out of this job. This is about as good as it gets, which must have been a hell of an email. On February 9th, 2017, David Gordon Green and Danny McBride, I know I couldn't believe it either, were announced as screenwriters with Green set to direct, and Carpenter acting as not only producer but also as an advisor. Carpenter stated that he was impressed with the pitch presented by Green and McBride, proclaiming that they get it. Instead of a reboot, Green and McBride chose to focus on continuing the mythology of the first two films while developing the story. McBride stated, we all came to the decision that remaking something that already works isn't a good idea, so we just have a reimagining instead. It created a pitch specifically to present to Carpenter, and that story was fleshed out more and more until all of the sequels were ignored, and the ending of the first film was retconned a little bit. The film, despite the writer's roots in comedy, was distanced from comedy, with McBride claiming, I think there was like maybe one joke on the page, but the rest is straight horror. Carpenter was not shy about voicing his displeasure about Rob Zombie, giving a backstory to Michael Myers, and wanted to take the character back to his more mysterious roots and back to being more of a force of nature, as he's supposed to be, almost supernatural. McBride commented on his approach of the character, I think we're just trying to take it back to what was so good about the original. It was just very simple and just achieved that level of horror that wasn't turning Michael Myers into some being that couldn't be killed. I want to be scared by something that I really think could happen. I think it's much more horrifying to be scared by someone standing in the shadows while you're taking the trash out. I really got to give credit to Danny McBride because he really does understand what worked in Halloween. Early in the development, the script did have Laurie's daughter, Jamie Lloyd, from Halloween 4 and 5 appear along with Laurie for the first time. But rewrites changed her name to Karen. Danielle Harris, who played Jamie in the aforementioned movies, voiced her objection of the idea of Laurie having a daughter that wasn't Jamie. Surprisingly, in September of 2017, Jamie Lee Curtis confirmed she would reprise her role as Laurie Strode. Prior to this, though, the production was unsure if Curtis would return, and according to McBride, they claimed that they busted their ass on the script to really make that Laurie Strode character something that she wouldn't be able to say no to. Curtis commented on her return as soon as I read what David Green and Danny McBride had come up with, and the way they connected the dots in the story, it made so much sense to me that it just felt totally appropriate to return to Haddonfield, Illinois for another 40th anniversary retelling. It's the original story in many, many, many ways, just retold 40 years later with my granddaughter. In October of 2017, Judy Greer had entered talks to play Laurie's daughter, Karen Nelson, and on December 7th of 2017, Andi Matichak was cast as Laurie's granddaughter, Allyson. The casting of Judy Greer bummed out Danielle Harris, stating that I was okay with it when she had a son, but now they're saying that it's the last one and she has a daughter and it's not Jamie. It's just kind of a bummer, I guess. In December of 2017, it was also announced that Nick Castle, the man who portrayed Michael Myers in the original film, would be returning to reprise his role with actor stuntman James Jude Courtney, set to portray Myers as well. Courtney was suggested to Malika Codd and David Gordon Green by stunt coordinator Ron Hutchison for his ability to do both physical stunts and acting. Courtney auditioned and received a phone call in December of 2017 affirming that he had the role. Green explained his vision for Myers' mannerisms, which was an amalgamation of Castle's portrayal and efficient cat-like movements. Courtney observed an actual cat to tailor his movements to Green's specifications. He called working with Castle an honor, while Castle considered it a passing of the torch. Courtney also used Carpenter and Castle's work on the original film to determine how the 40 years between the films would inform the character. There was confusion for a bit at the announcement of the two actors playing the same role, with some outlets reporting that it was Castle's casting, that he was retaking the role of Michael Myers, with Courtney only doing some of the stunts. However, Courtney revealed in an interview in 2018 that Castle's screen time was minimal, and that Courtney would be under the mask the majority of the time. This led to some speculation that Nick Castle's return had been misrepresented by the production company. Principal photography began on January 13, 2018 in Charleston, South Carolina. This was moved from the original start date in late October of 2017. Danny McBride wanted the horror of the film to be created by the tension and dread of the audience rather than relying on graphic violence. However, there was some gore, and the makeup and the visual effects were done by Christopher Nelson. Jamie Lee Curtis finished her scenes on February 16, 2018, with the rest of principal photography wrapping on February 19, 2018. A test screening was scheduled, and the response from the screening led to some reshoots in June of 2018. The score for the film was provided by John Carpenter, Cody Carpenter, and Daniel Davies. Halloween premiered at the Toronto International Film Festival on September 8, 2018, with a theatrical release on October 19th, taking an opening weekend gross of $76.2 million, making it the second best opening for October and the highest of the Halloween franchise. But how was the film? Well, let's take a look. But before we go any further, let me tell you, if you haven't seen this, there will be spoilers. The film opens with true crime podcasters Aaron Corey and Dana Haynes traveling to Smith's Grove Sanitarium to see Michael Myers, who's been locked up there since the conclusion of the events in the first movie. They interview Michael's new doctor, Ranbir Sartain, who once was a student of Dr. Sam Loomis, in hopes of gaining some insight into Michael's past actions. There, they are led outside to Michael, and while Aaron tries to talk to him,
Say something. Say something, Michael.
Michael does not respond. In Haddonfield, survivor Laurie Strode is living what you would call an isolated life when Aaron and Dana show up at her house to interview her, We find out she has been divorced twice, does not have a good relationship with her daughter Karen, and has had trouble with alcoholism. Laurie, while suffering from PTSD for the last 40 years, has also been preparing for what she considers to be Michael's eventual return, and she has learned to use various firearms proficiently, even going so far as to having a secret entrance to her basement where she has a stockpile of weapons. At Smith's Grove, there is to be a transfer of inmates, including Myers, to another facility. During the drive, the bus crashes and Michael escapes, killing a father and son who happen upon the crash and taking their car. The next day, Halloween, Michael shows up at a gas station that Aaron and Dana conveniently happen to be at, and Michael kills the attendants before stalking Dana into the bathroom. He attacks Dana, and her screams lead Aaron into the bathroom, where Michael kills them both before retrieving his mask from the trunk of their car. Meanwhile, learning of the crash and Michael's escape, Laurie tries to warn Karen and her husband Ray, but they feel Laurie is overreacting. That night, during a school dance, Allyson finds her boyfriend Cameron being a douchebag because he's drunk, so she leaves with friend Oscar. As this is going on, Michael has made his way to Haddonfield and begins a new night of terror. Moves on to the next house and kills the woman there, and so on and so forth. Allison's friend Vicky is babysitting Julian, and much like Annie in the first film, has her boyfriend come over for some under-the-sheets trick-or-treating. While making out on the couch, Vicky hears a noise. While trying to convince Dave to investigate, Julian comes downstairs and says that he saw somebody in the house. Because Dave's a pussy, Vicky checks out the room, but doesn't see anybody. At the request of Julian, though, she checks the closet. Michael starts stabbing the fuck out of Vicky, and Julian shows he's probably the smartest character ever in a horror movie by getting the fuck out of there.
Help! Julian! I'm going to help!
Vicky!
You go up there! You're gonna get killed, Dave!
Dave eventually works up the courage to try and save Vicky, but it doesn't really go too well for him either. Sheriff Deputy Frank Hawkins, who arrested Michael in 1978, shows up at the scene, and Laurie hears about the incident over her CB and also makes her way to the scene. As Hawkins is checking the house, Laurie pulls up and is looking around outside of the house before eventually spotting Michael in the upstairs bedroom. For those wondering, or that don't know, this is the only scene in which Nick Castle was under the mask. Michael makes his way outside of the house and is shot in the shoulder by Laurie, but disappears. We cut back to Allyson and Oscar. Oscar's an idiot and tries to kiss Allyson, who isn't having any of that shit, and leaves him behind in the yard. As Oscar throws himself a pity party, he spots Michael, not realizing who it is. In a pretty cool scene involving a motion light, Michael eventually gets close enough to kill the fuck out of Oscar.
What's up? I'm leaving, right?
Allyson comes upon the aftermath of the kill when she responds to Oscar's screams for help, and she sees Michael and flees. Some neighbors let her in eventually, and Hawkins, who has Dr. Sartain with him, is patrolling looking for Michael and Allyson, as Laurie, Karen, and Ray have gone to Laurie's house, and once Allyson is picked up by the deputies, that's where she is to be taken also. Hawkins eventually picks up Allyson from the house that she was hiding in, and while taking her to Laurie's, they come across Michael, who Hawkins proceeds to run over with his truck. As Hawkins looks over the assumedly dead Michael, Sartain, who is obsessed with Michael's mysterious motivations, attacks and kills him, before dragging Michael back to the vehicle and placing him in the back seat with Allyson. While they drive to Laurie's, Sartain explains that he orchestrated Michael's escape to see Michael out in the world and finishing what he started by getting the chance to kill Laurie 40 years later. Allyson distracts Sartain by claiming Michael spoke to her, and while they are pulled over, with Sartain trying to get Allyson to reveal what Michael said, Michael wakes up and kills Sartain.
Say something.
While Michael is distracted with stomping his head into the ground, Allyson escapes the vehicle. The two deputies posted outside of Laurie's home see the pulled over vehicle and proceed to investigate when they can't get anybody on the radio, only to also be killed by Michael. Michael drives the deputy's car to the front of Laurie's house, which leads Ray to exit the house to see if the deputies found Allyson. Only to discover the dead deputies and to be attacked and strangled from behind. Laurie finds the open front door and Ray's body outside. She locks the door and prepares for her showdown with Michael. He breaks through the glass of the front door and grabs her, and the two begin to struggle until Laurie shoots off two of his fingers with a shotgun. We get a nice bit of some cat and mouse through the house as Laurie checks each room for Michael and drops a gate down after checking each room. She eventually gets surprised by Michael and the two struggle, only for Michael to push her over a balcony. When he goes to check on her, though, her body's gone. Allyson eventually arrives in the house and Karen gets her down into the basement. As Michael figures out that the island in the middle of the kitchen is the cover to the entrance, he starts trying to remove it, eventually succeeding. Karen appears to break down, saying she can't face Michael and calls for her mother.
I can't do it! I'm sorry, I can't do it! Gotcha.
She quickly sheds the act that she put on and shoots him, with Laurie appearing behind him and attacking him as well. Michael falls down the steps and struggles with Karen as her and Allyson flee up the steps, only to let go after Allyson stabs him a couple times. Laurie engages a mechanism that puts steel bars across the entrance to the basement, trapping Myers in the basement. She reveals that the house was a trap, and a system has been activated that will burn it down, starting with the basement. The group leaves and we cut back to the burning basement, but Michael is nowhere to be seen. At the end of the credits, Michael can be heard breathing, but nothing is shown, leaving his fate fairly ambiguous. And that was Halloween 2018. And personally, I think it was the best Halloween movie since the original film. The film's greatest strength is that we get back to basics. Gone is Rob Zombie's overly cliche and overused backstory of a killer born from a dysfunctional family. We are given a Michael Myers that is doing what he's doing for no rhyme or reason, and that's how it should be. It takes him from being a sympathetic character that is a product of his environment to an inhuman monster. Laurie's character arc is done unbelievably well, and I can really get behind the fact that this is a psychologically damaged woman that has been traumatized by her experience 40 years ago. Karen can kind of come across as a bitch in parts of the film, but the woman has been dealing with her mother being the way that she is for her whole life, and was even taken away from her at a young age, so some resentment is to be expected. The characters are written pretty well and naturally for the most part. The one thing that I found odd though, and maybe this is just me, but I've never encountered anybody in my life that calls their grandmother, grandmother. Again, maybe it's me, maybe I'm nitpicking, but that just stood out to me as odd every time Allyson says grandmother. Ignoring the sequels and the really convoluted bullshit that was the Order of the Thorn plot brings the movie back to a realm of believability that is in line with Carpenter's original film. Going the route that they did with a simple yet still very effective formula works in this movie's favor. The first two acts establish what they need to, and there's some shakiness here and there, don't get me wrong. I get that Michael is supposed to be an unstoppable force, but at 61 years old, he still seems to come across as a little too unstoppable at times. I do like that he is not always the focus of the scene though. Something the original film did well. For instance, one scene shows a woman in a house. That camera is looking through the front window and Michael is shown in the periphery of the scene.
Good night, Sally.
Before making his way into the house and killing the woman. Another thing I like, and I admire that they did, is they didn't have to show every single kill in full detail. The woman being bludgeoned by the hammer is a far more disturbing scene than by not seeing it and only hearing it because your imagination fills in the visual details. There are some gory moments, don't get me wrong. We do get to see Michael stab a woman through the throat, and there's a pretty detailed head stomp. And I'm still not sure how a 61-year-old man has that ability to stomp somebody's head in the strawberry jelly, but it looked cool. The last act is where everything clicks and the movie fires on all cylinders. It's tense and it doesn't let up for quite a while, and I love that. What made the original film so great was the tension that you could cut with a knife, no pun intended. And that's what this film really does well in parts. The scene in the yard with the motion light, Michael first arriving in Haddonfield, the bathroom scene with Dana, and Laurie looking for Michael in the house. These are elements that, for me at least, have been missing in many Halloween films and what kept them from reaching the levels of the first film. I would be perfectly fine if this was the last time we see Michael Myers on the big screen, as this is a good way to send the character off, but I know they're planning for a sequel. While this movie doesn't do anything to redefine the genre like the original film did, that's okay. It never set out to do that. And while audiences that are used to splatterfests and the over-the-top nature of modern horror may not find as much enjoyment in this movie, those that are looking for something a little more subdued and uses tension and not gore to build fear will probably find something to love with this movie. I say give it a watch because in my opinion, like I said, this is by far the best Halloween sequel, and Michael Myers hasn't looked so good on screen doing what he does in quite a long time.